Hey, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this film at LACMA screening of Red, White, and Royal Blue. My name is Marc Malkin. I'm the senior editor of events and culture at Variety magazine, and I am so happy to be talking to Red, White, and Royal Blue co-writer and director Matthew López. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks.
I'm so happy we get to talk about this. This is a movie I've been, was waiting for a very long time. I was that guy on the beach reading the book. So let's take it back to when did you get involved with the project? At what point was the film at in terms of you coming on board?
I read the book. I was sent the book by my agent in early 2020, like just before a month or so before the lockdowns. And he thought I would maybe want to turn it into a musical. And I read it in like a day, I think. And I just fell mad. I just fell madly in love with it. I mean, I just absolutely. I'm like you. I wasn't on a beach, but I was, uh, in my home in the wintertime, and it just kept me warm. And I called him the next day and I was like, yeah, sure, maybe a musical, but like, let's talk about the movie first. And I basically stalked Greg Berlanti and Sarah Schechter until they gave me this job. I was like very, very determined to make this film. It was this kind of certainty. It's the kind of certainty that when you realize that it is that level of certainty, you really, really need to just do everything that you possibly can to make it a reality. And so, yeah, I was very shameless about letting them know that I would absolutely just like mow people down in traffic in order to get.
Before we keep talking, so does this mean you are working on the musical version?
No, I'm not. I don't happen to agree with my agent that it could be a good musical. I think I can only see it in filmic terms. I think that there are probably like really brilliant people who have an idea for how to turn it into a musical, and I can't wait to see what they do with it. But I my understanding of it is purely filmic. That said, I'd be first to buy a ticket to a musical of this thing.
Now, obviously, we know you as a writer. We don't know you as a director.
Mhm.
What kind of convincing did you have to do? Or did you just tell them, it's like, oh, I not only want to be writing on this, I want to direct this?
Yeah, it was very Sarah Schechter was very smart about it with me, and I was very upfront with her, and I just from the beginning, and I was like, I also want to direct this. I had worked on several films as a writer that hadn't gotten made, and it was starting to get very frustrating because usually it was around the time that a filmmaker came on board, and either they couldn't find a filmmaker for it, or they did find a filmmaker, and the filmmaker did their pass, and then for whatever reason it fell apart, and I was like, let me just, I really want this movie to get made. And I was looking for a project to direct myself. And I just said, if I can, let me just guide this with you to fruition. And they really supported me. And when I turned in my draft of the script, I did it in very intentionally, very, like a director's script. And which I remember Sarah's just saying like, well, okay, first of all, like, well done to sort of like write a script that would annoy any director who would lay their eyes on it, but you. So, I just I knew I knew how to make this film. I absolutely, from reading the book, I knew the kind of film I wanted to make. I knew that I could serve the story. And it wasn't just passion, it was just sort of like it just did something inside of me. It just turned on all the lights. And I think it really was just the passion and the certainty that I knew how to tell the story. I think that for every filmmaker, there is a different version of the film, right? And I just sort of like was the one who made it very clear that I was like going to prioritize this. I was going to, be a little obsessive about it the way you kind of have to be when you're making a movie.
Let's
And
start.
they backed me in the studio, backed me too. And so like they just, I think that passion to get it made was really, really what convinced them to give me a shot on this.
So let's talk about casting. You happen to cast two of my absolute favorites. Nicholas, I got to know because of Cinderella. Cinderella, there was my New York accent. Then Cinderella.
Cinderella.
Cinderella, Cinderella. And then Taylor, talk about two not only physically beautiful men, but just beautiful men all around. But these were characters that readers really got themselves attached to. And everyone, I think, had their version of what these men look like. Tell me about casting and how many actors did you look at for each of these roles?
Yeah, that first thing is very, very true. And we experienced it. And the only way I could deal with it was just to ignore it, because I knew that for every fan of the book, there was the ideal casting. And I knew that actually most people probably would be disappointed at the casting announcement, not for any other reason than it was just not the person that they wanted, right? And so I knew that the odds of making everybody happy were non-existent. So I just needed to make myself happy in that I needed to put together the cast that actually made sense for me and how to make the film. And when I met each of them individually, they just sort of instantly rose to the very top of those lists. And then when I put them together, they made perfect sense. They made perfect sense as the characters for me, and even more so, they made perfect sense as a couple. But yeah, we started the casting process this time 2 years ago. I remember Christmas of 21 when everybody was stuck at home with Omicron. I started going through what ended up being easily over 500 tapes for Alex alone. I mean, just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, which was exciting. Like I didn't know that there were that many young Latin actors in the business. Do you know, and like of a very specific age too. And it was really, obviously, yeah, it's daunting to look at that many tapes, but it's actually really exciting because you never know. Like back when I was the briefest second in my career early on when I thought I would be an actor, the thing they always tell actors is like, they're really rooting for you. They want you to be the one. And you don't ever believe that. You just think that's crap. It's actually like every time you hit click on the next tape, it's like, are you the one? Are you the one? So that was as thorough a casting process as I've ever been through it on any project. But I'm so happy that we did it because A, it yielded these two in the project, and B, it yielded these two in the project with zero doubts. Do you know what I mean? Like there was no stone left unturned when we decided on these two, and I think it was really helpful to be able to say that to people. It's like, these are the two. I promise you, there are no two others but them.
Nicholas had told me that he was actually one of the last interviews I did before the actor strike. And he had told me that he had read with a bunch of different actors, but as soon as he read with Taylor, he knew right away.
Yeah, I think he's not alone in that. I think we had, they were quite literally the last pairing we attempted.
Wow. And
what Nick doesn't know is that there was also a lot of Alex's reading with other Henrys, and so, but Nick's experience of it is definitely accurate in that, like, I put him up against, I think, about 3 or 4 Alexes, and he and Taylor were the very last pairing of chemistry reads that we did, and when as it was happening, and there were some chemistry reads that were promising, that were like, oh, I can work with this, I can, when it was those two from the get-go, and it was on Zoom too, which was like, made me very nervous, like how do we know that they actually don't have, like, I was worried about like the false negative, right? Like, what if they actually get in a room and have great chemistry, but it's Zoom, and what if it's just bad internet connection, But but we got on the Zoom with the two of them, and I swear within like 3 minutes, and that's probably being generous. I knew that we had found them, and it's not surprising to hear Nick say that because it was very obvious to us, and so of course it makes sense that it would be obvious to the both of them. And I remember texting under the cat, like we were all on Zoom, so I was like out of frame texting with Sarah Schechter, going, "We've got them. Here they are. They're great." And she was like, "Yeah, yeah." Everybody knew within 3 minutes of that Zoom starting that we had found our two actors.
And I've read that, you had rehearsals for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
What kind of banter? Because I feel, with the characters, they had to have that banter. They couldn't be close right away. There had to be
Mhm.
that tension, that sort of, that witty sarcasm at each other. Was that something that built up during rehearsals, or was it just instantaneous?
I mean, it was a little bit of both. It was instantaneous, and those two people got into a room together. They had spoken, I believe they had spoken on like FaceTime, and they had a couple of Zooms and phone calls before we all gathered. But they had never met physically in person until the first rehearsal. And they walked into the room. Once they were both in the room, it was just like boom, like blah, 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 like just like they were just like chatting, like they were old friends. So I actually was like, I made an excuse and I was like, I gotta get on a phone call. I'm so sorry. It's a costume thing. And I grabbed my assistant out of the room and I left just the two of them alone to talk. And like when I came back into the room, we went for a coffee or something. And like I came back 20 minutes later and they were just like laughing and old friends. And yeah, I think that the only way for them to, of course, you need them to be able to build that camaraderie in order to play the love story and to play the fun bits. But you also need to be able to trust each other in order to play the enemies part of the story. Do you know what I mean? You have to actually know how much to push, how much how much the other person can take. I think that 2 week period, what it was designed for. Yes, I mean, we looked at the text together, we did other scenes with other actors, but it really was, I just wanted those two actors to have 2 weeks of lunches. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
2 weeks of like 20-minute coffee breaks, 2 weeks of talking about what did you do the night before, like 2 weeks of them complaining about me, when I'm not in the room. Like that was like so important to me to create a bond, not just through the work that we did in rehearsals, but also just sort of like letting them become very, very comfortable with each other over the course of that time.
And whose idea was it to bring Uma Thurman into the White House?
I mean, well, I will say that Rich D'Elia, we had an American casting director for the Americans and a British casting director. Callie Valentine Hendry did the British casting. He he was so smart in that he started the conversation about Ellen with he proposed this simple criterion for whoever was to play her was, would you vote for her for president? Like that was and it really sort of whittled down the list. It's like yes, no, 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 yes, yes. And Uma was on the list from the very beginning, and it always just made sense to me, and I think it made sense to everybody else as well. And so in all of our conversations about, and the thing that was really exciting to me about Uma playing this part is I had never, to my knowledge, or at least in my experience, I'd never seen her play a role like this. Do you
Mhm.
know? She certainly had a lot of power in a lot of her films, in certain roles, but this kind of institutional power, this kind of sort of like of absolute power, and then also combining that with asking her to play mom, which she hadn't done a lot of in her career so far. And I really loved what she did with the role, and I was really excited about asking her to sort of keep in balance this sort of like the power of the presidency married with with the care of parenthood, that she just sort of kept in this gorgeous balance. And so it was a very easy thing once Uma said, "Yeah, I really would like to play this part." It was like, well, here you go. That we're off to the races now.
So you're a first-time director and you're directing Uma Thurman. What the hell is going through your mind?
I was very grateful. I was very grateful that I had several weeks under my belt by the time she came. She was with us for about 2 weeks. And I was very grateful too that I had already filmed the scene with Stephen Fry before Uma came to us. So Stephen was my canary in the coal mine in terms of working with a legend, right? Like I had Stephen Fry, I think like week 3, and it was for a day. And I was nervous. I think it was because I got through Stephen Fry's scene intact. And he was, of course, Stephen, such a gentleman and so kind and collaborative and just sort of a delight. But I also was acutely aware that like he's Stephen Fry. And I'm not going to screw around with his, not that I would if he wasn't Stephen Fry, but like you just got to be on your game, right? So by the time Uma came, I had sort of like that experience, but it was very funny because her first day on set was this big, huge, it was the scene at the White House dinner where they're in the tuxedos and they're sort of like, and it was also the day my parents were visiting on the set. And I put them in the movie. There's a little shot of them talking to Prince Henry in that scene. There's a brief shot of them talking to Prince Henry in the scene, the older couple that he's talking to. And so I remember I was like, what was I thinking? I have Uma Thurman's first day here and I've got my parents on set. This is stupid. So I basically just was like, I said to my mom and dad, I was like, I love you. I'm so happy you're here. I've got Uma Thurman. And they were like, yeah, go do your thing. And I remember being incredibly aware of the fact that I had this actor who had so much more experience than I did, who grew up on film sets, and she paid me the ultimate compliment of just like treating me no differently than any much more experienced filmmaker than she worked with. And that was the double-edged sword, because it was like both like gave me the room to like create and do my thing, but also like this expectation that I was going to like, always have an answer and always be ready to collaborate. And it ended up from the beginning just being this really beautiful collaborative experience with her. She came in with these very, very clear ideas about who Ellen was that I would never be able to dictate to her. I needed someone like Uma to go away and come to set ready. And she and our costume designer, they devised her costumes together. I didn't necessarily feel the need to sort of dictate to her how she would look. I knew I trusted my costume designer, and I knew that Uma and he would like. I think that actually that freedom of her and Keith being able to define how she looked was very key to sort of having her show up on set every day feeling ready to play this part.
So did you try to cast or get any real royals in the movie?
No. One of the things that was really important to me is to make sure that people understood that this was a fictional royal family. And I think that if we had tried to do that, we would have blurred those lines. I think that now, do I hope that maybe they've seen the movie? That's another question. Part of me thinks that they do have they watch The Crown on Netflix. I suspect they also have an Amazon account, so like
probably Amazon Prime, the Queen.
They definitely have Amazon Prime at Buckingham Palace.
What is her password? That's what I want to know.
Oh, I'm sure the Queen's password is something corgi related, I'm sure.
I was literally going to say corgi 123.
Yeah. We used to have a joke in the movie, in the script, about getting Amazon packages at Buckingham Palace and getting Amazon packages at Kensington Palace and getting Amazon packages at the White House. And it was I thought it was a pretty good joke. And then I was like, I can't do an Amazon joke on an Amazon movie.
You do Uber Eats.
It was a little meta. So I took that line out.
Did you try to film at Buckingham Palace?
No. I will say that the biggest challenge of filming royal related stuff in the UK is finding a location that the Crown hadn't already gotten to. That was genuinely, that was one of the hardest things, and we failed. The scene where and I'm very grateful that I'm very close with Stephen Daldry because he directed The Inheritance, and we
Right.
worked for 7 years together on that play. And I remember seeing him when we were in pre-production. I was like, you couldn't have left something for me to show you. So the scene where the opening scene in the movie where the wedding takes place, the big hall where the wedding is, that's the place in the first episode of The Crown where the king has his surgery. If you remember, if you
Yeah,
cast your
of
mind
course.
back to the very first season of The Crown,
Yes.
when the king is having his surgery, that is the same room that we shot that big wedding scene in. And then even more tightly bound is in the last couple of episodes, last couple of seasons, King Charles, then Prince Charles's house at Highgrove is the same house we filmed Kensington Palace in. So actually, those scenes, the king's rooms in the last couple of seasons of The Crown, are Henry's bedroom, Henry's piano room, the drawing room at Kensington Palace. So I'm watching The Crown and I'm like, oh my God, it's like the set for my movie. It is literally the set for my movie.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, Red, White, and Royal Blue could have been a TV series. It could have been the next generation's Crown.
It could have been. I think that the big difference is that, and you know, long before I got onto the project, there was conversations with Berlanti Schechter and Amazon and Casey McQuiston as to whether or not this was a movie or whether it was like a limited. And I know there are a lot of fans of the book that probably would have preferred the limited because they could have had more hours. But the decision was already made when I came on board, but I think it was the right decision, which is like, no, actually, this is a movie. There's something about the constraint of time that puts urgency to the story. I think that like unless you're actually telling like The Crown worked because you had like a 70-year reign, right? But like, you know, a limited series on the scale of like this would have gotten flabby quickly, I think. Like storytelling, you'll run out of story. And
Right.
so yeah, so I think they definitely made the right decision, and I was very happy to learn that they were doing a film and not a TV show when I came on board. That said, I think that, you know, there's a lot of talk about like what happens next and what comes next. And like you know, I think that there's more than just this story to be told in that world, for sure.
Do you want to be a part of the Red, White, and Royal Blue cinematic universe?
The Red, White, and Royal Blue-diverse. Yeah, I do. I think that would be fun. I think that I think that there's something really, really look, there's something very, very just sort of juicy about anything about royal families, anything about American political dynasties. I don't for a minute believe that it has to be contained to just one thing. You know, and I think that Casey's characters are strong enough to support other avenues of exploration.
So let's talk about, you know, you are a gay Latino filmmaker. You're sitting here making this movie. I'm of a certain age where a movie like this would never have been made.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even part of our imaginations.
Yeah.
What is that feeling being on set and sort of taking the wide view and going, I'm doing this?
I never happened on set because I had way too much to do. I was definitely not thinking philosophically on set. Yeah, I think that the thing that drew me to the story in the first place is that it at the center of it was a young queer Latin man. Like
Right.
Alex and I may have very different lives, but you know, we're both working, you know, at heart, I grew up in a working class family in the South. I am, you know, Alex is not too dissimilar from me in many ways. And reading the book, I never I had never encountered a character like that in this kind of story,
Mm.
you know, and I think that it was very important to me to in seeking projects to create that I wanted to challenge people's understanding of what a young Latin man or any Latin character is and could be in popular entertainment.
Right.
And along comes Alex Claremont Diaz, who's flawed, who's wickedly intelligent, who's a smartass, you know, and you don't get a lot of roles like that for young Latin actors, which is why it was so heartening when so many people auditioned for that role.
Mm.
It was it that feeling that you just asked about definitely didn't happen on set, but as as we were cutting the film, as we were approaching the release, as we were starting to share the movie with people, people began to sort of say that to me in response to the film. And people, it was not lost on them, what you just said. And you know, I think that it was really important to me. You have no control at the end of the day over what your first film will be. It's just the one that gets financed, you know, and I have other projects that I was trying to make and they didn't get financed and this one did. And that said, I think that for my first film to be a story about a young queer Latin man who whose queerness and his Latin heritage influence the story, and then in the fictional world of the story, he ends up changing the world in some ways. That was never lost on me, and it was never lost on Taylor. And you know, there was this one beautiful day on set where it was me and Taylor and Cliff Collins Jr., who plays his dad, and we were on the set of the Truman balcony shooting that scene, and Cliff was just like, I never thought I'd be in a movie like this in this way. And it was just it meant something to the three of us to be together like that and to share that day. And every time Cliff and Taylor got to work together, we did that was yes, that was the moment on set that we all just took a moment. And Cliff was always the one who made sure that we did take that moment. Because it's important. And I think that to ignore it, I don't think that's what people should be talking about when they talk about the film. There's so many, the film is more than that.
Mhm.
But to ignore it, if it's ignored when talking about the film, I think that also does a disservice to what the meaning of it, you know?
And listen, you're not only making this queer rom-com, but a queer rom-com with love scenes between these two men. You know, there was a
Yeah,
time where my first question to you would be like, how did you get that through? Who allowed that? Because most time you would never see that. Or it would be they're about to kiss, you go to black, and you
sure.
move on.
Right. I mean, it didn't come without its own conversations, you know,
Yeah,
internally. And when I pitched myself as the filmmaker, I pitched a version of this scene, which is to say, like, if you hire me, you're getting this.
right,
And if you don't want this, don't hire me.
right.
Uh, because while I was always aware of like what kind of movie I was making. I knew I was making a broadly appealing, you know, mainstream romantic comedy, right? I'm not doing All of Us Strangers, right? Which is a glorious, gorgeous film. They're very different movies. And but that said, I never wanted to be false about their sexuality. I never wanted to yeah, fade to black. And you know, within the story, it was very clear to me as I was writing it that actually their opening up to one another sexually is an important part of the story. It isn't just like icing on the cake for the viewer. It isn't actually just a love scene for the sake of doing one. It's actually like we kept discussing it and it was always very dramatically necessary. Things, what happens in that room in Paris changes the course of their lives, and it changes the audience's understanding of them. So we really invested in that scene very thoughtfully, but it was also like I think I also learned as a first-time filmmaker that part of my job with the support of my producers is leading the charge on this. Is like, we're not gonna, like, we're doing this. Like, we're doing this. Prepare yourselves, whatever you need to do to prepare yourself for this is happening. We're shooting this. It's like, and everyone who had access to those restricted dailies saw it, and I didn't get fired. So, there was some major support for that, and that's also not nothing.
One of the last times Variety spoke to you, what people may not realize is you're working on the remake of The Bodyguard.
I was working on the remake of The Bodyguard. One of the things that was true, this movie just sort of like obliterated my schedule and my availability. Like once it was like go, I was like, bye everybody, see you in 2 years. I had done a draft of The Bodyguard for Warner's and Dan Lin's company. I was incredibly excited that they asked me to do it, and we were really happy with the idea that we had for it. But then I was like, oh, I gotta go make, so I sort of like, we parted with peace and love, and I have no idea what stage it's at. I'm told that it's still a thing, but what that thing is, I don't know anymore. But it was really, really cool to be able to work on that when I did.
And The Inheritance, when are we going to see the movie?
I'd like that. I very much would like that. It's I think I need a little more time away from it. It was, all told, it was about a decade of my life. 7 years of development and production and 3 solid years of production between London, New York, and LA. And I think I need to like learn a little more about myself in the world before I come back to it. That said, I would love to do it. And I think that Stephen and I have an idea for how to make it work. We're really excited about it. But we both just sort of look at each other whenever we see each other. I mean, he just opened Stranger Things in the West End. He's been a little busy. And I actually saw him on opening night. And we were like, he's like, are we ready? And I'm like, he's like, almost, maybe, almost. Like, so I think we'll do it one day. We're not in any rush, just because we know we want to, when we do it, it's going to be the next 2 or 3 years of our lives again. So we both got to be in the right place for it.
And my last question for you, what is it like hearing from young queer people who say thank you for the work you've done, the visibility?
It's in many ways why I do what I do. I grew up at a time in an age where I didn't have a lot of mentors. But Terrence McNally was a huge exception to that for me. Terrence was so supportive of me, both as a writer and as a person. He really he believed in me in a holistic way. But largely, I was robbed of that. And I felt like I did a lot of the stuff that I did on my own without any help, but without any guidance, about how to be and who to be in the world and how to do that. So when I talk to young queer artists and they talk to me about what The Inheritance means to them, and they talk to me about what this film means to them, I think it's like, my attitude is a very simple one, which is like, it's my job to listen. Like, especially with Inheritance, which is like, I've occupied 7 hours of your time. Like, now it's my turn to be, if I've been in transmitting mode, now I have to be in receiving mode, and there's something really beautiful about being told regularly by people for whom it was intended that it hit the mark, that it did what it set out to do. And I think my hope is that that I get to continue to do things like that, and I get to continue to watch what younger artists make, maybe not even in response to what I do, because that's a little narcissistic, but just as a result of what I've put into the world. I'm so excited to see what others put out into the world. If my work has impact on their lives as artists.
What a gorgeous note to end on, Matthew.
Thank you for having me.
A special thanks to Film at LACMA and Amazon MGM Studios for this virtual screening and conversation. If you'd like to recommend Red, White, and Royal Blue to friends and family, or you want to watch it again, it's streaming now on Prime Video.